Tvam Una Prematastam Satavriti Vande Varam Deva Mokshana Moksha Vadima Nachanyam Rine Amare Shana Priya Varam Deva Mokshana Moksha Vadima Nachanyam Rine Amare Shana Priya Idam Deva Purnata Gopala Valam Sadame Manasya Virastam Kimanai Idam te mukam bojamapyantani lai Mritam kundalai snigdha raktaischa gopya Muhushuvitam vimbharatadaramne Manasya virastam alam lakshanavai Namo Devada Modarananta Vishnu Prasida Prabhu Duka Jalabdi Magna Vishnu Prasida Prabhu Duka Kripa Drishti Vrisyate Dinam Matanu Riyane Shama Magyane Dyakshi Drishya Kuveratmajo Vada Murtya Ivayatvat Ayamachito Bhakti Vajo Krito Cha Tata prema bhakti sakame prayacha Namakshe graho me stita modareha Namaste studamne spuraditi dame Tamiyadarayata vishvasya dame Namaste studamne spuraditi dame Tamiyadarayata vishvasya dame Namo Radhikaya Tadiya Priyaya Namo Nanta Dilaya Devaya Tuya Priya Priyaya Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. To the Supreme Controller who possesses an eternal form of blissful knowledge, whose glistening earrings swing to and fro, who manifests himself in Gokula, who stole the butter that the gopis kept hanging from the rafters of their storerooms, and who then quickly jumped up and ran in retreat in fear of Mother Yashoda, who would ultimately be caught. To that Supreme Lord, Sri Damodar, I offer my humble obeisances.
Those super excellent pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna's babyhood drowned the inhabitants of Gokula in pools of ecstasy. To the devotees who are attracted only to his majestic aspects of Narayan and Vaikuntha, the Lord herein reveals, I am conquered the whole realm.
O Lord, although you are able to give all kinds of benedictions, I do not pray to you for liberation, nor eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor any other rule. My only prayer is that your childhood pastimes may constantly appear in my mind. O Lord, I do not even want to know your feature as Paramatma. I simply wish that your childhood pastimes may ever be enacted in my heart.
O Lord, please with your gladness for this face, which is encircled by lots of curling hair, and become ready for a gift of the beauty of your goodness. O Lord, I describe this, millions of obstacles are broken, the main state of possibility.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunadiravanachari Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatiravanachari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Stotara Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Srimad Bhagavatam Ki All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Jnanatimirundasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, we're reading from the 5th canto, chapter 17, text 5. And we'll probably read through text 10 today. The title of the chapter is called The Descent of the River Ganges. And I think they're all in prose, so we'll probably just read the translations and the purports. Text 5. Translation. On top of Mount Meru, the Ganges divides into 4 branches, each of which gushes in a different direction, east, west, north, and south. These branches, known by the names Sita, Alakananda, Chakshu, and Bhadra, flow down to the ocean. The branch of the Ganges this is text 6, the branch of the Ganges known as the Sita flows through Brahmapuri atop Mount Meru, and from there it runs down to the nearby peaks of the Kesarachala mountains, which stand almost as high as Mount Meru itself. These mountains are like a bunch of filaments around Mount Meru. From the Kesarachala mountains, the Ganges falls to the peak of Kantamadana mountain and then flows into the land of Padrashva Varsha. Finally, it reaches the ocean of salt water in the west. Text 7. The branch of the Ganges known as Chakshu falls onto the summit of Malyavan mountain, and from there cascades onto the land of Ketumala Varsha. The Ganges flows incessantly through Ketamala, and in this way also reaches the ocean of salt water in the west. I think there's maybe a misprint. Previous verse. I think so. Then, anyway, I'll just show you a picture because I remember I was showing you guys pictures of Mount Meru last week, and there's like this huge golden cylinder in the middle of the universe, which acts as a cosmic pivot or axle, which everything revolves around. And on top of that Mount Meru, there was like these 4 rivers that was kind of splitting off from the middle. So that's the Ganges. And it splits off into the 4 directions, east, south, west, and north. But in this text 6, it's saying, finally it reaches the ocean of salt water in the west. And then text 7, it says, in this way also reaches the ocean of salt water in the west. Now, if you look at the specific areas and mountains that are being described, text 6 actually corresponds with those areas and mountains that are on the east. So I think it's just a misprint, because the river on the east portion of the Ganges actually goes to, I think the Gandhamadana mountains are on the east side of Jambudweep, and so is the land of Bhadrashvavarsha. If you remember, it's a little detail, but okay. Text 8. The branch of the Ganges known as Bhadra flows from the northern side of Mount Meru. Its waters fall onto the peaks of Kumuda Mountain, Mount Nila, Sveta Mountain, and Shringavan Mountain in succession. Then it runs down to the province of Kuru, and after crossing through that land, flows into the saltwater ocean in the north. Text 9. Similarly, the branch of the Ganges known as Alaknanda flows from the southern side of Brahmapuri, Brahmasadhana. Passing over the tops of mountains in various lands, it falls down with fierce force upon the peaks of the mountains Himakuta and Himakuta. After inundating the tops of those mountains, the Ganges falls down onto the tract of land known as Bharatavarsha, which he also inundates. And this is where we are. So now we're hearing about the descent of the Ganges from it's starting from the causal ocean, which is actually outside of our material universe. Lord Vamana kicked a hole through the universe with his toe, and from that hole came the waters of the causal ocean. And I think it first appeared on Lord Shiva's head, and then went to Dhruvaloka, the heavenly planets, and it's coming down, and then it's going to fall on top of Mount Meru, and then at Mount Meru it's going to split off into 4 directions and go to all the different lands of Jambudweep. So now we're finally getting to us, where we are. Finally the Ganges is coming to our realm of Bharatavarsha. Then the Ganges flows into the ocean of salt water in the south. Persons who come to bathe in this river are fortunate. It is not very difficult for them to achieve with every step the results of performing great sacrifices like Rajasuya and Ashwamedha Yagyas. Purport. The place where the Ganges flows into the salt water of the Bay of Bengal is still known as Gangasagara, or the meeting place of the Ganges in the Bay of Bengal. On Makara Sankranti, in the month of January, February, thousands of people still go there to bathe, hoping to be liberated. That they can actually be liberated in this way is confirmed herein. For those who bathe in the Ganges at any time, the results of great sacrifices like Ashwamedha and Rajasuya Yagyas are not at all difficult to achieve. Most people in India are still inclined to bathe in the Ganges, and there are many places where they can do so. At Prayag, Allahabad, many thousands of people gather during the month of January to bathe in the confluence of the Ganges and Yamuna. Afterward, many of them go to the confluence of the Bay of Bengal and the Ganges to take bath there. Thus, it is a special facility for all the people of India that they can bathe in the water of the Ganges at so many places of pilgrimage. In the last verse, text 10, translation, many other rivers, both big and small, flow from the top of Mount Meru. These rivers are like daughters of the mountain, and they flow to the various tracts of land in hundreds of branches. So, there are two areas of the Srimad Bhagavatam which can be studied empirically. It's two areas in which both the Srimad Bhagavatam deals with and modern science deals with. One is like the anthropology or the history of mankind. The Srimad Bhagavatam deals with it, and so does modern science. And another is cosmology, which is what we're hearing about now. The cosmology just means how we see the universe, like what are the different pictures of the universe. And you'll see that throughout different cultures around the world, you'll see different views of what the universe is like. In fact, Sadhaputta, when he was putting together that Mysteries of the Sacred Universe video, he was showing that how, in fact, in many ancient cultures throughout the world, in Canada, South America, Australia, China, everywhere, there were these kind of common themes in how people viewed the universe. Like all the models of the universe from people back in the day, they all had some kind of big mountain in the middle, which kind of acted like a axis from which the universe revolved around. And so a lot of times on top of that big mountain there were maybe a tree, like a tree of life or something, and holding up the universe as this like serpent, which is very interesting. And there's these different discs or layers of planetary systems. Like you'll see this in many depictions of the universe from like the Mayan people, from different people throughout the world. Yes, Imagine. So we like that. We like that theory. The scholars, they have three theories because it's very difficult to explain for scholars. Like how could everybody come up with the same model of the universe all over the world? Like how is that even possible? And they might vary slightly with names and different things, but there are certain like general principles that are like the same in all the cultures. So the scholars there's like three different ways that the scholars try to explain this. One is that it's kind of genetically it's like genetically encoded in human beings to come up with some theory of how the universe is structured, how it works, and then they all just happen to be genetically modified or genetically coded to come up with a similar theory of how the universe is. Of course, that idea kind of got dismissed because it's not a very good explanation. Another explanation that they came up with was that maybe it's just chance. It happened that way. All these people in different cultures, they all just came up with the same idea of what the universe is like, and chance. Of course, that's not very likely either. Yeah, Raktak? Yeah, so right. So then the third reason, which scholars also acknowledge, is that maybe back in the day there was one culture around the whole world, and then over time, as whatever cultures diversified, and little details were changed here and there, but ultimately it's coming from the same one culture. So this is another explanation. A lot of scholars don't like it because I don't know, they just don't like it. We of course like it because that matches the Vedic idea that there was one culture, one Vedic culture throughout all of the world. And that helps explain why you'll see these four rivers in different cultures, like the Mayan culture. You'll see someone like a personified mountain or something with four rivers coming out the different sides. And so many cultures all over the world, they describe the same exact things we're describing here today. So it's very interesting. Um, and cosmology, I know Prabhupada really put a lot of emphasis in, I don't know, depicting the Vedic version of how the universe is structured. So much so that he asked his arguably his most brilliant genius disciple, Sadhaputta, to depict what the universe is like from the Vedic perspective. And then that model would be shown in the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium in Mayapur. So that's kind of a unique name for a temple of the Vedic Planetarium. Normally we hear of temples like Radhamadhava Temple or Kishori Temple, or some kind of temple. We don't usually hear of a temple called the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. But Prabhupada put a lot of emphasis into depicting this version of the universe. So his idea was that he'd build this huge planetarium which would attract scholars and people from all over the world to come to Mayapur and see what the universe is like. So one reason is so that, they can get Lord Chaitanya's mercy, because while they're looking at the universe, Panchatattva is right there, and Lord Chaitanya is giving them their mercy. And one is just so that we can increase the faith in the Vedic wisdom. And this is actually something profound. And then, when they're there, over there is Radhamadhava, and over there is Nrsimhadev. So it's a very, Prabhupada was very broad-minded, and it's happening, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, so here's describing the descent of the river Ganges. So the technology is not necessarily given so much how this happens. It's like, are we seeing like water flying through space and, coming down to the Himalaya mountains, like, how does it work? The technology is not given. But it says that it just flows. So it flows from the, like the heavenly regions down to the middle range regions to the earthly regions, and it ultimately goes down to the bottom of the universe, the lower regions. This is talked about earlier in the Srimad Bhagvatam, when Maitreya was speaking with Vidura. Vidura was asking these really nice questions to Maitreya Muni about whatever, different things, and Maitreya was like, wow, these are really good questions. They remind me of the questions that the four Kumaras, they asked Lord Sankarshan, back in the day. And then it was described that, Maitreya went on to describe that when the four Kumaras, they wanted to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam from Lord Sankarshan, Antashesh down at the bottom of the universe. So they took a bath at Brahmapuri, the top of the universe, in the river Ganges, and then when they came out of the water, they ended up through some mystic potency in the bottom of the universe where Lord Sankarshan was. And then they heard Srimad Bhagavatam from him. So we know that the river Ganges is all throughout the universe, from the top to the bottom. It was also really interesting too when I went to South India 2-3 years ago, and we went to this one place called Simachalam. I think you're from there, or you've been there? Oh, okay. Anyway, there's this place called Simachalam. It's this big hill, which there's a temple of Lord Nrsimhadev at the top. And one might ask the question, if there's this temple way up on the hill, how do they get all their supplies? If this temple is way up on the hill, then how do they get all their supplies? Because it's so far up there. And it's not so easy, especially over thousands of years. How are they going to carry everything up there regularly? It's kind of tough. So we heard that there's the people there, everything that they need for their sustenance is actually provided there on the hill. All the trees, all the vegetation, it's all there. They don't need to go anywhere else. They get everything from the trees, and they have just enough to serve the deities and and for the devotees there. And there's actually this stream of water coming out of the mountain. It's just like gushing out of the mountain. And there's no like snow or ice or anything. That's not like melted ice or something. It's just tons and tons of water coming out of the mountain. And it's kind of mystical. It's just all this water coming out. And the pujaris, they just, every morning they go and they collect the water and they use it for their worship of Shringadev, and that's what sustains them. Yeah, it's very simple. That they say, Krishna provides, everything we need is here. We don't have to go anywhere else, and they're happily serving Lord Nrsingadev. In fact, if you read the Lilamrita, you'll see that there's a drought in that area for 5 or 6 years, a severe drought, and many places around that area were struggling to grow crops, to have food. But this place was completely satisfied. They had no problems during the drought because this river kept, all this water kept coming out of the mountain. Maybe, I don't know, probably. So anyway, like that too. Like if you go to the Gangotri, like the birthplace of the river Ganges, you'll see just water gushing out of the mountain, tons and tons of water. It's kind of a mystical how that happens, just tons of water coming. Yeah, it's not like there's like a pump at the bottom of the mountain that's, pumping the water up and it gushing out the top or something. It's, I don't know. So anyway, it's interesting. Okay, so here in the purport of text 9, we're reading about the time of Makara Sankranti. So maybe those from India, they're familiar with this time. It's a very it's like a holiday. And it's the time when the sun is at its lowest point and it begins to start heading back up north. So not only does the earth move, spin around to get our 24 hours a day, but it's also, the sun is also moving around the earth relative to the earth. So the earth is spinning and the sun is going, like that, and going around the earth. So when the sun is at the top, the northern part of its path, that's when the days are the longest and the nights are the shortest, and it's in the summertime. And then when the sun's at the bottom of the path, the days are the shortest and the nights are the longer. So the time period when the sun actually begins to head back north from long dark days, that's called Makara Sankranti. So days start to get longer and like that. And this is considered to be a very auspicious time of the year. In Bhagavad Gita, we learn that if like a soul leaves his body when the sun is going in the northern direction, that's considered a very auspicious time to leave the body, and one can actually get liberated if he meets other criteria. But it's described like that. So it's a very auspicious time. In fact, Bhishmadev, he had the ability to leave his body whenever he wanted. So he was lying there after the battle of the Kurukshetra in a bed of arrows, and he was having this really nice conversation with the Pandavas, deep philosophical conversation. Krishna was there, and Makara Sankranti happened to come up. It happened, the most auspicious time to leave the body came up. So he said, "All right, I'm going to leave my body now," and then he left his body. Of course, Bhishma, he didn't have to leave his body at that time. He was pure devotee, so it didn't really matter when he left, but he chose to leave at that time. Yeah. When I was in South India, we just happened to be there during Makara Sankranti on January 14th. Our South India Yatra ended in Sri Rangam, and it ended on January 15th. So on January 14th, and apparently there's like this 10-day festival in Sri Rangam. And then, like when we were there, they brought out the Utsav deities of Ranganath, and they carried them on different palanquins, like Lord Brahma's Vangsa, the swan, and Lord Shiva's bull, and like they were doing all these different big festival going on in Sri Rangam. So anyway, so Makara Sankranti is a very auspicious time, and Ganga Sagara, which is also described here in the purport, is a very auspicious place. Ganga Sagara is where the Ganges meets the Bay of Bengal and flows into the ocean. So there's actually two stories which kind of highlight the importance of Ganga Sagara. One is that there's this, and they both have to do with this place called Sveta Ganga in Jagannath Puri. There's this one kund there, one lake called Sveta Ganga. It's considered to be non-different than the Ganges. Some might think, okay, yeah, right, non-different. But anyway, so we'll hear. So there's a story to show like how the Sveta Ganga and the Ganges are actually non-different. So once there was this Brahmana who lived in Jagannath Puri. He used to serve the deities. He was a pujari, and every day he used to go to Sveta Ganga to take his bath. And when he went to one day he went to Sveta Ganga to take his bath, and he thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice to take a bath in Ganga Sagara? And but that's kind of far away from Puri. So he was just thinking this way, and when he went to go take his bath, and when he rose out of the water, he found himself, whoa, I'm in Ganga Sagara, over 300 something miles away. That's kind of far out. Another thing that happened when he rose out of the water is kind of strange enough that he was in Ganga Sagara, but then right after that some woman came up to him and said that, you're supposed to be my husband. So he was a little bewildered. First of all, kind of crazy how I'm here in Ganga Sagara, and then someone's telling me that I'm supposed to be their husband. Then the woman explained that, yeah, I've been worshiping Lord Jagannath for so long, and I prayed to him so much, and he appeared to me in a dream that said, there's going to be one man that's going to appear from the Ganga Sagara at such and such location at such and such time, and here you are. And he said, that's going to be your husband. So, okay. And then I guess this Brahmana was thinking, okay, I guess that's what Jagannath's will is. That's what Jagannath wants. So, it's kind of strange enough. So, okay. So then they got married that night. And the next day he went to go bathe in the Ganga Sagara again. And when he took bath and he came up out of the water, and he's back at Sveta Ganga, back in Jagannath Puri. So I guess he didn't want to tell anybody what happened, because first of all it's kind of far out, and second of all, if he had told the pujaris at Jagannath Puri, there would have been some issue, because there's all these rules in Jagannath Puri. The Smarta Brahmana culture is very strong there, so they say that if you're a pujari at the Jagannath temple, that if you marry somebody outside of, someone from Puri, or what's that? From the community or something like that. If you marry outside, that's considered, okay, that's, you lose your position, you lose your service to Jagannath, and you're not really, something like that. So he didn't want to lose his service to Jagannath. He was very attached to that service. So he just kept quiet, and he didn't say anything. So many years passed, and one day he was finishing up his worship of Lord Jagannath, and he came out of the temple, and one woman came up to him and said, "Oh, my husband, very nice to see you." And he was like, "Who are you?" She's like, I'm your wife, and look, here's your son, and we can't, it's very nice to see you. And he was like, no, no, no. And you can kind of figure out how, when they were having this conversation, other pujaris were kind of overhearing, like, what's going on over there? And you know how that goes. Some drama's going on. Everybody's kind of all ears. So then he kept denying like that he knew this woman, that this was his son, and but many people were talking, rumors were spreading, and word got around so that word got up to like the chief priest, the Jagannath Puri, and so he came down and he checked out the situation, and the chief priest asked the woman, so how do we know that you're actually this Brahmana's wife? Like, how do we know that? So she said that, well, I have these, he on our wedding night, he gave me all these garments, these family heirlooms and rings and things, like, look, here they are. And the Brahmana's like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. I guess it happened. I went, we got married, and then he explained all the details. So the reason I didn't want to say anything, because I didn't want to lose my service to Jagannath. And the chief priest could understand that this was actually all the will of Jagannath, and that he arranged this whole thing, and he didn't lose his service. He got to keep his service. But the woman said, well, what about my son? What's his position? Because in Jagannath Puri, the system is that the son takes over the service of the father. So you're born into like a pujari family or something, and then when the son grows up, he takes over the service of the father, and like that's how services continue. But there's only like so many services. There's something like 28 services in Jagannath Puri, and now there's another person there the woman's asking, what about him? What's his service? So then the chief priest actually made another service for the son, like a 29th service. And that's even still going on today. So you can go to Jagannath Puri and meet the person who is doing this 29th service, who's like a descendant from that Brahmana. Anyway, so that's kind of one story about showing how Ganga, at least Sveta Ganga, is non-different than Ganga and the power of bathing in the Ganges. And then there's another story of Ganga Mata Goswamini. There's many women spiritual masters in our disciplic succession. One's Janava, who's the wife of Nityananda. She was an initiating spiritual master in our disciplic succession. One was Hemalata, who was the daughter of Srinivasacharya, and another was Gangamata Goswamini. And they're all extremely, extremely qualified. I'll talk a little bit about Gangamata Goswamini. Yeah, Raktak. They had men and women disciples. They were qualified. I mean, well, here, Ganga Mata Goswamini, she used to have like kings and royal people and people from all over the area. They wanted to come and hear from her because of how qualified she was. She gave excellent Bhagavatam classes. So she was born in what is now Bangladesh, and she was born as the only daughter of the king there. So she was just a daughter of a king in that area. And the system was that whoever the son is, they usually take over the kingdom when the king dies or gets old or something. Then the son takes over, but she didn't have a brother, or the king didn't have any sons, so she was the only heir to the throne. She was the only offspring. And so then they said, okay, all right, so whoever she marries, the husband of her, he becomes the king. So either the son becomes the next king, or the husband of the daughter becomes the next king. That's how the system worked. And so but with her, she was born as Sachi Devi in Bangladesh. So Sachi Devi, when she was very young, she didn't want to get married. She never had a desire to get married. In fact, she was very adamant. She told her father, I am not going to be married to any man who was born. I will only marry the immortal Krishna. And she was very strong in her determination. And then the father's like, okay, you might be a little unrealistic here, she might be being a little stubborn. Well, maybe over time she'll change her mind. But even as she got older, she never changed her mind, and she never got married. So when the king died and the queen died, she inherited the kingdom because she was the only heir. And she ruled the kingdom. She ruled it very, very effectively for some time, and everything was going well under her rule. But while she was ruling, she really had this intense desire to find a spiritual master. So she arranged things in her kingdom in such a way that she could take a leave of absence, and she went to Jagannath Puri to hear from spiritual personalities, to take a pilgrimage, to try to find a spiritual master. So when she went to Puri, she saw remnants of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. The Sachi Devi appeared a couple generations after Lord Chaitanya left the planet. So this is the time frame we're working with here. So Lord Chaitanya left the planet. Sachi Devi went to Jagannath Puri. She saw remnants, but the bhakti hasn't been sustained, perfectly in Jagannath Puri. But she heard that the bhakti has been sustained very nicely in Vrindavan. There's still very many elevated persons there, associates of Lord Chaitanya, who are there. So she decided to leave Jagannath Puri and go to Vrindavan. So here we have a queen who's used to royal opulence and everything, going to Vrindavan to find a spiritual master. So she goes to Vrindavan and she starts to hear from many different personalities there. And she becomes most attracted to hearing from Haridas Pandit. Haridas Pandit, he's a disciple of Ananta, and Ananta is a disciple of Gadadhar Pandit. So she used to hear from Haridas Pandit regularly, and she got very inspired by hearing from Haridas Pandit that she asked if she could take initiation from him. And Haridas Pandit first he said no, because, I'm here in Vrindavan, you're a queen. Here in Vrindavan, everything is very austere, and you're used to royal opulence, that I don't know how you'll be able to live here. So, no. So then after that, she wasn't discouraged. That was amazing. She didn't take she wasn't discouraged by that answer, so she decided she'll give up everything. She gave up all of her royal opulences, gave up everything. She only had one set of clothes. And she decided to live at the bank of the Yamuna, like a mendicant. And just, what she did for her sustenance, she just did madhukari. She just went around and begged. Whatever she got, that's what sustained her living. And she cleaned the temple, she did some menial service, and she lived in the bank of the Yamuna, very, very austere. And she did this for a whole year. Then, after a year, she went back to Haridas Pandit and asked again, I would like to take initiation from you. Can I be your disciple? And then Haridas Pandit was moved by her incredible devotion to Krishna, so he accepted her as his disciple. And there was actually one other, Haridas Pandit had another female disciple. Her name was, I think, Lakshmi Priya. And Lakshmi Priya was also an astounding devotee. She chanted 3 lakhs of names every day, just like Haridas Thakur, 64 times 3 rounds, or every day. So this was like the powerhouse, friends, Lakshmi Priya and Sachi Devi. And Haridas Pandit instructed them to go reside at Radhakund, and they actually made their residence between Radhakund and Shamakund. So if you go to Vrindavan, you can see their little temple there. And then one day, Haridas Pandit was informed that nobody was worshipping the Damodar Shila of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in Jagannath Puri. Nobody was worshipping. So Haridas Pandit asked Sachi Devi if she could go to Jagannath Puri and take up the worship of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's Damodar Shila. Now this was kind of a big instruction because women are, especially in Jagannath Puri, women are not allowed to worship like a Shila, Govardhan Shila or Shila like that. So this was like a kind of like a breach of rules that a woman would be worshiping Shalagram Shila or something. So, but on the order of her spiritual master, she did it. So she left her situation in Vrindavan, went back to Puri and started worshiping Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's Damodar Shila. And she was, very fearless and determined. She didn't care. So many people were saying so many things about her, but she was just fearless and determined. And then as she was worshiping the Damodar Shila, she ended up starting to give Srimad Bhagvatam classes. Because she heard these amazing classes from, very, very elevated Vaishnavas like Krishnadas Kaviraj, who wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Haridas Pandit, who was instrumental in convincing Krishnadas Kaviraj to write the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and these personalities heard it directly from Gadadhar Pandit, just none other than Radharani. So I mean, she's full of realization. One of her instructions was that, okay, you've heard all this, the Srimad Bhagavatam from us, so now you share it with others. So then she started a regular Srimad Bhagavatam class, and very quickly it became known like how amazing she was, how elevated she was, and people from all over the town started to come and hear from her. In fact, she attracted the attention of the king of Jagannath Puri, and the king wanted to do something for her. So one night the king had a dream, and Jagannath appeared in the king's dream and said, "You should build Sachi Devi her own ashram, where she can, her and her followers can go and they can live peacefully." So the king, as soon as possible, he made arrangements so that she could have her own ashram in Jagannath Puri and serve Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's Damodar Shila. So then after some time, she was very, very busy, always serving Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's Damodar Shila, but she had wanted to go to Ganga Sagara, which is what we're reading about here, to take baths. She had that desire, and because all these devotees from Jagannath Puri, they were going down there to take bath, maybe during some auspicious time like Makara Sankranti, and she wanted to go. But she couldn't because she was so busy serving the Damodar Shila that she had to remain here. So then she had a dream. Jagannath appeared to her dream and said, "Go to the Sveta Ganga and take bath there." And, because it's non-different than the Ganges, so just take bath there. So then she went to the Sveta Ganga, and she took bath there, and while she was taking bath, the lake started to rise. The water started to get higher and higher, and then actually the water rose so much that it carried her from Sveta Ganga all the way to the Puri temple. So she was like going in a wave of water from Sveta Ganga all the way to the Puri temple. And it's quite a distance. When I went to Jagannath Puri, it's not a short thing. It's quite a distance. And after the water subsided, she found herself in the middle of the Jagannath temple with Jagannath right there. And this was late at night too. This is not during the day. This was late at night, so nobody was around. But the only people that were there were the guards who were guarding the temple. So the guards like, oh, what's going? They're hearing noise going on in the temple, so they unlocked the doors and went in, and they saw this mendicant lady there in the middle of Jagannath temple, and they thought, who is this? She's stealing. She came to steal from Jagannath. So they arrested her and they put her in the king's prison. And that night, the king had a dream with Lord Jagannath. And Lord Jagannath chastised the king so severely. He said, your men have arrested the most pure devotee, my most, pure devotee, Sachi Devi. I personally brought her so that I can have her association, because I never get to see her because she's always busy serving, the Damodar Shila, and I never get to see her. She's so incredibly pure. And your men have arrested her and put her in your prison. Go immediately. Release her, fall at her feet, and beg to take initiation from her. So then the king woke up and immediately went to the prison where Sachi Devi was, and he immediately fell at her feet and begged for initiation, and Sachi Devi just laughed and laughed and laughed. She thought the whole thing was very amusing. How wonderful Jagannath is, how Jagannath arranged the whole thing, and so she accepted him as her disciple. So after this incident, she became known as Ganga Mata Goswamini. So this is a story of her, and also the kind of relates with the Ganga Sagara and the Ganges River. So very beautiful story. She's a wonderful personality. So the bathing in the river Ganges is very auspicious. Bathing in the Ganges at the place known as Ganga Sagara, where it meets the Bay of Bengal, is more auspicious. And then even more auspicious than that is bathing in the Ganges in the Ganga Sagara during Makara Sankranti. So, and here Prabhupada says in the purport that thus it is a special facility for all the people of India that they can bathe in the water of the Ganges at so many places of pilgrimage. Because, there's so many, the Ganges is huge, and there's so many pilgrimage sites along the Ganges that Indians can go to and to get benefit from bathing in the Ganges. Other people around the world can also go to India and get benefit from bathing in the Ganges, but it's not as easily accessible as it is to the people of India. They can just go. So the Srimad Bhagvatam actually says that above bathing in the Ganges in the waters of the Ganges is chanting the holy names. More auspicious. You get greater benefit by chanting the holy names. And that's accessible to anybody. It doesn't matter where you are. Anybody can chant the holy names. So even if you're a taxi driver or something, and you're you see a devotee, and devotees, they chant Haribol. So you say Haribol, Haribol, because you're trying to get their business, because they want you to, you're trying to get them to come and ride in your taxi so that you can make money. But you're saying Haribol to get their attention. Even that person is getting so much benefit from chanting the names of God. So, but the thing is, we're kind of so familiar and accustomed to chanting. We're so close to it that we don't always appreciate the chanting. So, but it's very, very powerful and very, holy name is very powerful, very merciful. Okay. Any quick things anyone like to share? Add anything? Okay, so we'll end here. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Tomorrow's going to be 11.